Guest video: Tchaikovsky and his patron, Nadezhda von Meck. In our introductory video, we defined the experience of union, also known as hieros gamas, chemical wedding and mystic marriage, as the union of the symbolic masculine, that is the conscious self with its ego, desires, reasoning and will, and the symbolic feminine encompass the emotions and its access via perceptions to spiritual input, inspiration, intuition, and imagination. And indeed the masculine, conscious self is denied access to all spiritual input except via the feminine, subconscious. Meaning that a marriage of some sort has to occur under the auspices of divine love before the person is able to progress spiritually. The emotional and irrational but creative feminine needs the intellectual, rational, driven, and willful masculine to ensure those creative works come to fruition. And one of the ways in which this can be achieved is via patronage, in this case spiritual patronage. The emotional but highly creative feminine, who may be male or female, finds a patron, rational, unemotional but well organized enough to fund and support them, and again this person could be male or female under the protection of divine love. About Tchaikovsky, the feminine. Pyotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky, 1840 to 1893, was a Russian composer whose works included symphonies, concertos, operas, and chamber music. He was extremely emotional, the feminine. In 1850, aged just 10, his family sent Tchaikovsky to the Imperial School of Jurisprudence in St. Petersburg, as a boarder, 800 miles from his family. Tchaikovsky's separation from his mother caused an emotional trauma that tormented him throughout his life. Her death from cholera in 1854, when he was just 14, further devastated him. More than 25 years after his loss, Tchaikovsky wrote, "Every moment of that appalling day is as vivid to me as though it were yesterday." He stayed a bachelor, but in 1877, at the age of 37, he married a former student, Antonina Milyukova. The marriage was a disaster. The couple lived together for only 2.5 months before Tchaikovsky left, overwrought emotionally and suffering from an acute writer's block. Tchaikovsky's family remained supportive of him during this crisis, but he was also aided by Nadezhda von Meck, his patroness. Nadezhda von Meck, the masculine patron. Nadezhda Filaretovna von Meck, the 10th of February, 1831 to the 13th of January, 1894. Was a Russian businesswoman who became Tchaikovsky's patron, supporting him financially for 13 years. At 17, Nadezhda married Karl Otto George von Meck, a 27-year-old engineer. Together they had 13 children. Nadezhda, however, persuaded her husband to move into Russian railway construction. 20 years later, there were over 15,000 miles of lines in Russia, much of it laid by Karl von Meck, by this time a multimillionaire. In 1876, Karl von Meck died suddenly, leaving a will which gave Nadezhda control of his vast financial holdings. So Nadezhda von Meck concentrated on running her husband's former business affairs. And thus began her patronage of Tchaikovsky, an extension of her love of music and her financial position, though as we shall see Meck was looking for a bit more. She and Tchaikovsky exchanged well over 1,200 letters in which Tchaikovsky was more open about his creative processes than he was with any other person. And with her patronage came a relationship that, while remaining epistolary, grew extremely intimate. A bond of great friendship, where she took on the masculine role and he took on the feminine. But she stipulated that they should never meet. Indeed, she made it plain that he should put marriage out of his mind altogether. Nadezhda regularly professed her hatred of marriage to Tchaikovsky.
You may think, my dear Pyotr Ilyich, that I am a great admirer of marriage, but in order that you not be mistaken in anything referring to myself, I shall tell you that I am, on the contrary, an irreconcilable enemy of marriage.
And she also made it plain why she felt herself well suited to being a patron.
I am very unsympathetic in my personal relations because I do not possess any femininity whatever. Second, I do not know how to be tender, and this characteristic has passed on to my entire family. All of us are afraid to be affected or sentimental, and therefore the general nature of our family relationships is comradely, or masculine, so to speak.
As their relationship developed, she provided him with an allowance of 6,000 rubles a year, large enough that he could leave his professorship at the Moscow Conservatory to focus on creative work full-time. They carried on a significant correspondence between 1877 and 1890. The details they shared were extraordinary for two people who never met. He was more open to her about much of his life and his creative processes than to any other person. Her feedback became so important to him that, after the critics lambasted his Fifth Symphony, she provided him with the support to persevere with his composing. Nadezhda von Meck remained a devoted supporter of Tchaikovsky and all his works, but her bond with him depended on not meeting him. Indeed, it seems Nadezhda knew full well the role she was playing. Tchaikovsky understood this, writing to Meck, "You are quite right, Nadezhda Filaretovna, to suppose that I am of a disposition sympathetic to your own unusual spiritual feelings, which I understand completely." In other words, Nadezhda knew she was thus masculine to his feminine, and that together they had embarked on the mystic marriage. About the video. Pyotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky's Symphony No. 4 in F minor, Opus 36, was written between 1877 and 1878. Here is the name to look up. Pyotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky's Symphony No. 4 in F minor, Opus 36. During the composition of the symphony, Tchaikovsky wrote to Nadezhda that he wanted very much to dedicate it to her, and that he would write on it "Dedicated to my best friend." He had begun composing the symphony not long after von Meck had entered his life, and he would complete it in the aftermath of his catastrophic marriage. It is possibly his most emotional work. The dedication was significant in more than one way. Dedications of works to patrons were not gestures of humble gratitude, but expressions of artistic partnership. By dedicating the Fourth Symphony to her, he was affirming her as an equal partner in its creation. Death. But the patronage ended tragically. In October 1890, von Meck sent Tchaikovsky a year's allowance in advance, along with a letter ending her patronage. She claimed bankruptcy. But the reality was that by 1890, Meck was gravely ill. She was in the latter stages of tuberculosis and would succumb 2 months after Tchaikovsky's death. An atrophy of her arm also made writing nearly impossible. Dictating letters via a third party would have been awkward, especially messages as frank, informal and personal as the one she and Tchaikovsky had exchanged. The final letter and payment from Meck to Tchaikovsky were delivered by a trusted servant of hers, Ivan Vasiliev, for whom he held warm feelings. One can imagine the reaction. Nadezhda's friendship and encouragement had remained an integral part of Tchaikovsky's emotional life. He remained bewildered and grief-stricken for the remaining 3 years of his life. What is perhaps equally tragic is that she was just as distressed about his apparent abandonment of her, but then she never told him the truth, how ill she actually was. On the 30th of October, 1893, Tchaikovsky conducted the premiere of his Sixth Symphony, the Pathétique in St. Petersburg. 9 days later, Tchaikovsky died there, aged 53. Nadezhda von Meck died from tuberculosis on January 13, 1894 in Nice, in the south of France, 2 months after Tchaikovsky's demise. After her mother-in-law's death, Anna von Meck was asked how the late patroness had endured Tchaikovsky's death. She replied, "She did not endure it.